My children told me the nursing home was for my own good. That is exactly what they said, standing in my living room, the room where I raised them, where I helped with homework at that table and watched them open Christmas presents in front of that fireplace and coached them through failures and celebrated their victories and held this family together through every hard season this life sent our way. Standing in my living room on a Saturday afternoon with a suitcase they had already packed for me and a folder of paperwork they had already signed in my name, my son and my daughter looked at me and said it was for my own good. "Dad, you can't manage the house alone anymore," my daughter Sandra said. "It's too much for you. You need proper care now." "You'll love it there," my son Kevin said. "People your age, activities, someone checking in on you every day, you'll be so much happier." They took my keys off the hook by the front door. My keys to the house I have owned for 34 years. The house I bought with 30 years of running a small electrical contracting business, every contract bid carefully, every job completed correctly, every dollar saved and reinvested and protected with the discipline of a man who grew up with nothing and decided that his children would grow up with something. They took my keys like they were picking up something left lying around. And they drove me to Maplewood Care and Rehabilitation Center on a Saturday afternoon, and they helped carry my 2 bags into a room with 1 window and a narrow bed and a television mounted so high on the wall a man would need to strain his neck to watch it. They told me I would adjust. They said adjust, the way people say accept, the way people say stop expecting anything different to someone they have already decided cannot expect anything different. Kevin patted my back at the door. Sandra kissed my cheek. They told me they would visit Sundays. They drove away. I sat on the edge of that narrow bed in the room with 1 window, and I looked at the parking lot and I thought about what I had seen on Sandra's laptop 3 weeks earlier, an email she did not know I had read, from a real estate agent at Carver Realty Group about the projected spring listing value of a 4-bedroom Craftsman on Birchwood Lane. My address. I thought about the conversation I had overheard between Kevin and Sandra in my own kitchen 2 weeks before the Saturday with the suitcase. The conversation about the equity in the house and what it would look like divided between the 2 of them and how they needed to move while the market was strong. I thought about all of that. And then I thought about Marcus. Marcus, who had been coming to my house 4 mornings for a week for 9 months, as a home care aide, who had my coffee ready before I came downstairs without being asked more than once, who sat with me through my physical therapy exercises without ever making me feel like a burden for needing them, who asked about my years running the contracting business and listened, actually listened, and remembered the details the next time, who had a son in 3rd grade named Deshaun and was doing everything alone in the way that single fathers do everything alone, with a quiet, relentless dedication that does not announce itself because there is no one there to announce it to. I thought about Marcus, and I made a phone call. Not to Sandra, not to Kevin, to my attorney. His name is Harold Sims, and he has handled my affairs for 21 years, and when I told him I needed him at Maplewood Care and Rehabilitation Center the following Tuesday, he said, "Of course, Walter, what time works for you?" Not, "Are you sure about this?" Not, "Have you spoken to your children?" Not any of the questions that assume an old man in a nursing home has lost the right to know what he wants. Just, "What time works for you?" He came Tuesday. And when my children eventually go to sell the house on Birchwood Lane, when they call the real estate agent and arrange the listing and start calculating what they are going to do with the equity, they are going to meet its new owner. His name is Marcus, and he has already been given the keys. My name is Walter James Okafor. I am 74 years old. I ran a small electrical contracting business for 30 years. I built a house into a home and raised 2 children in it, and I loved them with every resource I had, which turned out to be more than I knew until the moment I discovered it was not enough to make them treat me with the basic dignity of a man who built what they were standing on. And if you are listening to this right now, stay with me, because this is not a story about bitterness. I want to be clear about that from the beginning. This is a story about a man who sat on the edge of a narrow bed in a room with one window and made a decision about what clarity is, about the difference between knowing what is happening and being defeated by it, about the specific and undefeatable freedom of a man who still has his mind, his attorney, and his name on a deed. Before I go any further, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, because this story happens everywhere, in every country, in every family where children have begun looking at an aging father and calculating instead of loving. Tell me where you are. I read every single one.
And if you are new here, subscribe. Hit that button right now. The stories I tell on this channel are the ones that stay with you long after you finish watching. I want you here for all of them. I was born in Houston, Texas, the second son of 5 children, to a man named Joseph Okafor, who had come from Nigeria at 24 with a degree in civil engineering that American employers in 1962 would not fully credit, and who had responded to that injustice not with surrender, but with a particular and magnificent stubbornness. He took every job available. He learned every system. He saved. He built. By the time I was 10 years old, my father had his own small construction consulting firm and had purchased the house we grew up in outright without a mortgage, which he announced at the dinner table one evening in the same tone he would have announced that dinner was ready. Matter of fact, dignified, like there was never any question that this was coming. My mother, Grace, was a registered nurse who worked the overnight shift at Methodist Houston for 27 years and who came home in the mornings and made breakfast before she slept because she had decided that her children were going to start every day with a hot meal, and she was not going to let a little thing like working all night change that. I absorbed all of it. The stubbornness and the discipline and the specific understanding that what you build is a reflection of who you are and that the building never stops regardless of what the circumstances are on any given day. I studied electrical engineering at Texas Southern University, worked for a large contracting firm for 6 years after graduation, learned the work from the inside, not just the technical side, but the business side, the bid process, the client relationships, the management of a crew, the specific discipline of a job that requires everything to be done correctly, because incorrectly done electrical work does not just fail, it burns down buildings and ends lives. At 32, I started Okafor Electrical Contracting. Just me and 2 guys I trusted completely, and a truck I had bought secondhand and maintained with the same care I applied to everything else. By 45, I had 22 employees and a reputation in Houston's commercial construction market that was worth more than any single contract, because a reputation is what brings the next contract and the one after that. I married Diane at 30. She was a high school art teacher with a specific and fearless creativity that balanced my precision in the way that good marriages balance. We were happy in the full sense, not the performance of happiness, but the actual thing, the daily choosing of each other, the building of something that was greater than either of us individually. She died of ovarian cancer at 58. We had 28 years. They were not enough. They were also everything. Sandra and Kevin grew up in the house on Birchwood Lane. I am their father, and I will tell you what I know about them honestly, because the truth requires it, and I have never been a man who told convenient versions of the truth. They were good children. Diane and I raised them with everything we had. Whatever they became, whatever the drift of years and priorities produced in them, they did not begin as the people they were on that Saturday with the suitcase. I need you to know that. I need you to know that I remember who they were before I tell you who they became. Sandra is 46. She lives 25 minutes from Birchwood Lane with her husband Philip and their 2 teenage boys. She works in corporate communications. She is skilled at managing narratives, at shaping the story that is presented versus the story that is true. She learned some of this precision from me. What I did not foresee was what she would eventually use it to manage. Kevin is 43. He lives 35 minutes away with his wife Brenda and their 1 daughter. He is in commercial real estate. He understands property values the way I understand electrical systems, from the inside, with a thoroughness that comes from years of daily application. He is persistent and organized, and I now understand had been applying those qualities to my estate for longer than I knew. The drift happened the way these things always happen, in increments, in small moments that are each individually explainable, and that only reveal their true shape when you lay them end to end and look at the full line. 3 years after Diane died, Kevin became executor of a small investment account she had held. The account's final disbursement was lower than what the statements projected. When I asked Kevin to walk me through the accounting, the explanation was long and technical and designed, I understand now, to be too involved to follow rather than clear enough to satisfy. I was in grief, and I trusted my son, and I let it go. I should not have let it go. There was the matter of my truck. 2 years later, my work truck, I had kept it after selling the business. It was in excellent condition. Kevin offered to sell it for me, said he had a buyer, good price. The check I received was significantly below the price he had quoted. He said the buyer negotiated. He seemed briefly uncomfortable and moved on. I let him move on. There was the matter of my bank accounts. In the 18 months before the Saturday with the suitcase, Sandra had begun accompanying me to my bank appointments. She said it was to help me keep things organized. I had had a minor health episode, nothing severe, a brief cardiac scare that resolved cleanly, and in the aftermath, Sandra had used that moment of my concern to make herself useful in ways that felt at the time like care, and that I understand now were positioning. She was given access to 2 of my savings accounts for what she called convenience of management. Harold, when he came on Tuesday, showed me what convenience of management had looked like in practice across 18 months. Small withdrawals, individual amounts below automatic alert thresholds, consistent, patient. The application of Kevin's real estate arithmetic to my savings by Sandra's communication skills, in a collaboration that had clearly been running longer than either of them intended me to know. The nursing home was the final move, the one that required me out of the house so the house could be accessed. A house worth, in the current market, that Kevin understood better than anyone, considerably more than any account they had already reached. I saw the real estate agent's email on Sandra's laptop on a Sunday afternoon when she had left it open on my kitchen table. I was not looking for it. I was passing through the kitchen, and the screen was bright, and the message was there. The Birchwood Lane property is ideal for a spring listing, excellent market conditions. Once the title situation is resolved, we can move immediately. Title situation. I was 74 years old, and I had just been told by my own property that I was a situation. I closed the laptop. I sat down at my kitchen table, the table where Diane and I had made every major decision of our marriage, where Sandra and Kevin had done homework and eaten 10,000 dinners and grown into the people they were. And I sat very still for a long time. And then I called Harold. Harold Sims has been my attorney for 21 years. He handled the sale of O'Coffer Electrical Contracting. He handled Diane's estate. He has reviewed every significant financial decision I have made since I was 53 years old, and he has never once failed to give me the precise, unvarnished truth that I asked for. I called him the Monday after I saw the email. I told him everything: the investment account, the truck, the bank access, the email, all of it, laid out in the order it had happened, the sequence visible from a distance in a way it had not been visible from inside each individual piece. Harold listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Walter, how much access does Sandra have to the savings accounts right now?" I told him. He said, "I want you to do some things before you see either of your children again. I am going to walk you through them, and I need them done today." We spent 2 hours on the phone. Revocation of Sandra's account access, notations with the bank, a full review of the Birchwood Lane deed, still in my name only as it had been since I bought it, which no one could change without my signature or a guardianship order that no one had yet filed. "Walter," Harold said, at the end, "I want to talk about your estate planning, about what the documents currently say and whether you want to change anything in light of what you've told me." "Not yet," I said. "I want to wait. I want to see the full move before I respond to it." A brief pause. "Are you sure?" "Walter," I said, "I ran a contracting business for 30 years. I never bid a job without understanding the full scope of the work first. Let me understand the full scope." He almost laughed. "Yes, sir," he said. "I'll be standing by." 2 weeks later, they came with the suitcase. I need to tell you about Marcus before I tell you about Tuesday, because Marcus is at the center of this story in a way that the nursing home and the will and the real estate agent's email are not. And you need to understand who he is before what I did makes the sense it needs to make. Marcus Webb came to me through a home care agency 9 months before the Saturday with the suitcase. I had had the cardiac scare I mentioned, minor, but enough that my doctor recommended some support at home a few mornings a week. I resisted. I am the son of Joseph O'Coffer, who built a business out of nothing, and I do not ask for help easily. Then I stopped resisting, because my father also taught me that stubbornness in service of pride is a different thing from stubbornness in service of principle, and that a man of sense knows the difference.
Marcus arrived on a Monday morning at 8 o'clock sharp. On time, which I noted, because punctuality is a communication. It tells you how a man understands his relationship to other people's time. He was 34 years old, originally from Memphis, Tennessee, had moved to Houston 8 years earlier. He was solidly built, quiet, in the way of men who have learned that words are more valuable when they are chosen carefully. He made coffee with me. He asked me once how I took it. He has never asked again. He had a son named Deshaun, 9 years old, in 3rd grade, whose school photographs were on Marcus's phone lock screen, and whose reading progress Marcus tracked with the specific, focused investment of a father who has decided that nothing is more important, and means it. Deshaun's mother had left when the boy was 2. Marcus did not tell me this with self-pity. He stated it the way he stated most facts, directly, without editorializing, as information about a situation that he had decided to manage rather than suffer. He was raising his son alone, working a demanding job, living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a part of the city where the rents had been climbing in ways that made the 2-bedroom feel increasingly temporary.
He was saving for a house. He told me this in the 4th month of coming to my home, in the way you tell someone something when you have decided they are worth telling. A modest house, he said, something that was his and Deshawn's, something stable, something that could not be taken by a landlord's decision or a lease's end. He had been saving for 4 years. At his current rate, with his current expenses and the current market, he told me with the clear arithmetic of a man who does his sums without illusion, it would be 5 or 6 more years before the down payment was where it needed to be. I listened to that and said nothing at the time. I thought about it for several months. I thought about my own father purchasing the house in Houston outright and announcing it at dinner in the same tone as announcing dinner was ready. Matter of fact, dignified, like it was always coming. I thought about what it had meant to my father to have something that was his, to stand on ground he owned, to build from a foundation rather than on borrowed time. I thought about Marcus and Deshawn, and when Sandra and Kevin drove me to Maplewood on a Saturday and took my keys off the hook by the door, I knew who I was going to call. Let me tell you about Maplewood Care and Rehabilitation Center. Not to manufacture sympathy, I am not a man who operates on sympathy, but because the accurate picture of the situation is necessary for the story to mean what it means. It was not the worst place a man could find himself. The staff was professional, the facility was clean, the food was adequate. Some of the other residents were men I found genuinely interesting once I started paying attention, which took about a week because the first week I was occupied with the mechanics of what I was going to do. But it was not mine. The room was not mine. The schedule was not mine. The small daily decisions, what time to eat, when to sleep, when to go outside, were made by a system that was designed for a population rather than for Walter James O'Coffer specifically. I had spent 30 years running a business where every decision was mine, where I bid the jobs and managed the crew and set the standards and stood behind the work with my name. Every contract I signed had my name on it. Every job I completed had my reputation attached to it. I understood what it meant for something to be yours, and I understood what it felt like when it was taken. I understood it, sitting on the edge of a narrow bed, looking at a parking lot. I called Harold on Sunday, my cell phone, which Kevin had left me, possibly not thinking about what a cell phone with Harold Sims in the contacts could accomplish. I said, "Harold, Tuesday, 2 o'clock. Bring everything." He said, "I'll be there." Harold arrived at Maplewood on Tuesday at 1:59 because Harold is a punctual man who understands that punctuality is a communication. He signed in at the front desk and was shown to the family consultation room, which existed for exactly this purpose: residents meeting with their attorneys, which is a right no facility can remove regardless of how a resident arrived there. He set his briefcase on the table, and he looked across at me with the steady regard of a man who has been doing this for 21 years and who did not need me to explain the weight of what I was sitting inside. He said, "Walter, how are you holding up?" "I am clear," I said. "That is how I am." He opened his briefcase. "Then let's get to work." We worked for 2 hours and 20 minutes. The first matter was the accounts. Harold had already taken the preliminary steps from the week before. He now showed me the full picture of what Sandra's access had permitted across 18 months. I looked at the numbers. I noted them. I made the decisions Harold outlined, and he documented each one. The second matter was the admission paperwork for Maplewood. Harold had reviewed it in advance. He set a specific page in front of me. "Walter," he said, "this page designates Sandra as your medical proxy and healthcare decision maker." "I know," I said. "I didn't sign it." Harold looked at the signature line. Back at me. "I see," he said, in the voice of a man who is filing something carefully for later use. "How quickly can that be undone?" I said. "Revocation of an unauthorized proxy is immediate upon filing," Harold said. The challenge to the admission itself, based on the documentation irregularities, is more involved, but proceeds from an extremely strong position. "Good," I said. "Now, the will." Harold laid the current will on the table. 5 years old, written before the drift had revealed its full shape. We went through it provision by provision with the thoroughness that the situation required. Then I told him what I wanted to do instead. I told him about Marcus, all of it, the 9 months, the punctuality, the way he made coffee exactly right, Deshawn's photograph on the phone lock screen, the 4 years of saving toward a house that was still 5 or 6 years away. I told him about the house on Birchwood Lane, about what 34 years in it meant, about what I wanted it to do next. Harold listened with the precision of a man who understands that the details matter, because the documents that will come from this conversation need to be unambiguous to anyone who reads them under any circumstance. When he finished, he said, "Walter, this is your legal right, entirely and completely. I want you to know that Sandra and Kevin may challenge it." "Let them," I said. "I have the real estate agent's email. I have the account records you pulled. I have the unauthorized proxy signature. I have 21 years of documented competence in this relationship, and the contracting business I built and sold at full capacity. Let them bring whatever challenge they want to bring." Harold looked at me for a moment. "You've been preparing for this." "Walter," I said, "I spent 30 years in the electrical contracting business. A job that is not planned correctly is a job that burns something down. I plan correctly." He drafted. I reviewed. I signed. The notary he had brought witnessed and sealed. At 3:51 on a Tuesday afternoon, the new will was executed. The house on Birchwood Lane goes to Marcus Webb, effective upon my death, held in a trust structured by Harold to withstand any challenge from any direction. I also told Harold about the letter I was going to write to Sandra and Kevin. He said he would deliver it personally, in a meeting, with witnesses, at the time of his choosing. I wrote it that evening, by hand, on good paper, because some things deserve to be written by hand. Marcus came to see me at Maplewood on Thursday, his day off. I had not asked him to come. He came because that is who Marcus is. He brought Deshawn, who walked into my room and looked immediately at the television mounted too high on the wall and said, with the directness of a 9-year-old who has been raised by a man who values honesty, "Mr. Walter, who put the TV up there? Nobody can see that right." I said, "You are absolutely correct. Pull that chair over." Deshawn moved the chair with the focused effort of a boy who has decided a thing needs doing. He sat. He told me about school, about a math test he had done well on, and a book report he was working on, and a friend who had said something that bothered him and that he was trying to figure out how to handle. He talked the way children talk when they trust the adult they are talking to, which is completely, without editing, with the assumption that the adult is interested. I was interested. I am always interested. Morris sat in the other chair. He looked around the room with the eye of a man who knows care environments. He looked at the narrow bed and the one window and the television and said nothing about any of it, which was exactly right. He said, "Mr. Walter, what do you need?" Not, "How are you adjusting?" Not, "I'm sure it'll be fine." Not any of the comfortable things people say when they want to close a conversation rather than open it. "What do you need?"
I looked at him. "Sit still for a minute, Marcus," I said. "I have something to tell you." He sat. I told him about the will, what Harold had drafted, what my decision was, what the house on Birchwood Lane was going to mean for him and for Deshawn. He listened the way he always listened,
completely, without interruption, with the full attention of a man who understands that listening is not the pause between his own words, but an act in itself. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mr. Walter, I can't accept—" "Marcus," I said, "I am going to stop you right there." He stopped. "I built that house 34 years ago with everything I earned from a business I started with 2 employees and a second-hand truck. I designed every room in it with my wife. I know every sound it makes in winter. I know where the electrical panel is and which breaker controls which room because I wired half of it myself before the inspectors got involved. I know that house the way a man knows something he built." He was very still. "I have the legal right to decide what it does after I'm gone. That right is mine, and I have exercised it with full capacity and Harold Sims documentation to prove it. I chose you because in 9 months of watching you, I have seen more of my father in you than in either of my children. That is not a small thing to say, and I do not say it lightly." Marcus looked at the floor for a moment, the specific look of a man absorbing something that is larger than he was prepared to receive. "What I ask," I said, "is that you take care of it the way it deserves, that you let Deshawn grow up in it, that you plant something in the back garden, because Diane planted things there, and the garden should have something growing in it." He looked up. "And I ask that when Deshawn is old enough, you tell him where it came from, not as a debt, as a story, about a man named Joseph Okafor who came to Nigeria and bought a house outright and announced it at dinner like it was always coming. Tell him that is what men do. They build, and then they decide what the building does next." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Yes, sir." 2 words. The right 2 words. Deshawn, from the chair below the television, said, "Are you going to come visit us, Mr. Walter? Our apartment has a good view of the parking lot, but Dad says we're going to get something better." "He is right about that," I said. Deshawn considered this. "Good," he said, and went back to the book he had brought with him. I looked at Marcus. "Good boy," I said, and I meant it about both of them. I wrote the letter to Sandra and Kevin over 2 evenings at Maplewood, by hand, on the good paper Harold had brought me from the house, because my father used to say that a man who cannot write his own important words does not fully own them. I will not read you every word. Some of it is between a father and his children and belongs to that specific history, but I will tell you the shape of it. I told them I knew, not some of it, all of it, the investment account, the truck, the bank access, the email from Carver Realty Group, the conversation in my kitchen about equity and timing and the market being strong. I told them about their mother, about what Diane built in that house, and what she would have thought of what they had done in it. I did not use her memory as a weapon. I used it as an accurate reference point because she knew them and loved them and would have been precise about what she expected from them, and her precision deserved to be represented. I told them about my father, Joseph, who came to this country with a degree that would not be recognized, and who responded with stubbornness and work and purchased a house outright and announced it at dinner like it was always coming. I told them that everything I built came from watching that man, and I told them that what I had observed in them across the years leading to that Saturday did not reflect the watching of that man. I told them about Marcus, who he was, why I had chosen him, not to wound them, to make them understand that my decision was made with full knowledge of all available choices, and that Marcus was the choice that reflected what I believed the house deserved. And at the end I wrote, "I am your father.
I will be your father for the rest of your life, and I will not stop loving you. Because love, when it is real, is not a transaction that can be canceled by behavior. But I will not pretend that what you did was anything other than what it was. I have named it in this letter so that none of us have to carry a pretense. That is a gift. I am giving you the truth instead of a performance.
Come and see me. Not about the will. Harold will make clear that the will is final. Come because I am your father, and I am in a room with one window, and the television is too high on the wall, and I am 74 years old, and the time is the time we have, and none of it is guaranteed. I love you both. That is final. Your father, Walter James O'Coffer. Harold will deliver it, in person. In a meeting Sandra and Kevin will be told is about estate matters. They will arrive expecting a conversation about assets, and they will receive this letter, and the will, and the full documentation of everything I know. I am told they will be very surprised. I am not surprised that they will be surprised. They made the mistake that people make when they decide a man is diminished. They stopped paying attention to who he actually was. They saw a 74-year-old in a house worth money and stopped seeing Walter O'Coffer, who built a business with 2 men and a second-hand truck, and who does not sign anything without reading it first, and who had Harold Sims's number in his phone. I was not passive in those weeks at Maplewood. I want to be clear about that. I was not an old man waiting to be saved. I met Mr. Raymond Cole in the common room on my 4th day. 79 years old, retired high school football coach, who had the specific energy of a man who has spent his life organizing other people toward a goal and found institutional passivity physically uncomfortable. He was playing chess against himself when I sat down across from him. He looked up. "You play?" "I haven't in years," I said. "That's not a no," he said, and he reset the board. Raymond and I played chess every afternoon. He was better than me. He remained better than me for 3 weeks, and then I studied his patterns with the same attention I used to bring to bid analysis, and I beat him on a Tuesday, which he accepted with the grace of a man who has lost well many times. I met Mr. Teddy Banks, 76 years old, whose children had also placed him at Maplewood, and who had no attorney and no plan, and who had, I quickly determined, significantly more rights than he had been told he possessed. I spent several afternoons helping Teddy understand those rights and connecting him with a legal aid organization that handles elder financial exploitation cases. The last update I had, his situation was under active review. I organized a morning coffee group, posted a notice on the board. 7 men showed up the first morning. We talked about the things men talk about when they are finally in a room without anything to perform. Work they had done, things they had built, children they had raised, women they had loved, the specific texture of a life fully lived. We met every morning after that. I was not waiting to be saved. I was Walter James O'Coffer in a room with one window, still entirely Walter O'Coffer, still building something wherever I found myself. Harold filed the revocation of the unauthorized medical proxy the week after Tuesday. The nursing home, when presented with documentation showing the signature irregularity on my admission paperwork, entered a review process that resulted in my status being reclassified from involuntary to voluntary, pending my own decision about next steps. Harold also filed the account documentation with the appropriate authorities. It is proceeding. I will say only that it is proceeding from a well-documented position and leave the specifics for when they are fully resolved. The house on Birchwood Lane is still in my name. It will remain so until it goes to Marcus. No spring listing,
No meeting with Carver Realty Group. No equity divided between two people who had decided it was already theirs. Kevin called me 3 weeks after I arrived at Maplewood. Cheerful, surface level, asking about the activities and the food and whether I needed anything brought from the house. The performance of a man who believes the situation is managed and maintaining appearances. I was warm and brief. I told him I was doing well. I told him I had made some good friends. I mentioned conversationally that Harold had visited, which produced the briefest hesitation in Kevin's cheerfulness before he resumed it. I noted the hesitation. I said nothing about it. Sandra has not called. I want to be careful about what I say here, because the lesson in this story is not the obvious one, and the obvious one is too simple to be true. The obvious lesson is what goes around comes around. The obvious lesson is about the satisfying reversal of a plan turned back on the planners. There is something in that narrative that is human and understandable, and I am not going to tell you I felt nothing when Harold confirmed the will was executed. I felt something. But that is not the lesson. The lesson is what my father did. The lesson is Joseph O'Coffer at a dinner table announcing that the house was paid for in the same tone as announcing dinner was ready. Matter of fact, dignified, like it was always coming. The lesson is that what you build is real, that 30 years of doing the work correctly, of showing up, of maintaining standards that did not bend to convenience, of treating every contract as a reflection of your name, all of that is real. It does not disappear when you are placed in a room with one window and told to adjust. It is still there. It is still yours. And the lesson is that the people who underestimate you are always wrong. Not sometimes, always. Because underestimating a person requires stopping paying attention to who that person actually is, and stopping paying attention is always a mistake. Sandra and Kevin stopped paying attention. They saw a 74-year-old man who had a cardiac scare and needed some help around the house, and they made the specific and catastrophic error of deciding that the man they were looking at was the situation rather than the person. They managed the situation and forgot about the man. The man had Harold Sims's number in his phone. The man had been planning since the Monday after he saw the email on Sandra's laptop. The man had 30 years of doing things correctly and did not intend to do them incorrectly now. I want to speak to the men listening to this, the fathers, the men who built something with their hands and their time and their discipline, and who are now in the stage of life where the people around them have started treating the building as though it belongs to them because they are standing on it. Your building is yours. Your name on a deed is your name. Your mind is your mind until a court says otherwise, and a court cannot say otherwise simply because your children have decided it is inconvenient for you to remain capable. Know your attorney. Keep his number current. Keep your documents current. Keep your accounts in order in the way that a man who built something keeps everything in order, with precision, with documentation, with the understanding that what is not written down is what gets taken. And pay attention to who is actually showing up in your life. Not who says they are showing up, not who posts the right things or makes the right calls at the right intervals to maintain appearances. Who is actually there? Who makes the coffee right without being asked twice? Who brings his son and lets the boy talk to you like you are worth talking to? Who asks, "What do you need?" and means it as a question rather than a formality? Those people are rare. When you find them, see them clearly. Marcus Webb showed up for 9 months without agenda. He showed up because that is who he is, and who a person is demonstrated consistently across 9 months of ordinary days is worth more than any contract ever signed. I chose him because he earned it, not with performance, with presence. That is the lesson. That is all of it. There is a window in my room at Maplewood.
One window, facing the parking lot, not what I would have chosen. But in the early morning, before the day fully starts, there is a quality of light that comes through it that I have decided is worth noticing. The specific quality of ordinary light on an ordinary surface, visible only to a man who is paying attention. I have been paying attention my whole life. My father showed me how. Joseph Okafor, who came from Nigeria at 24 and built something from a credential that would not be recognized and an injustice that would not bend, he showed me that attention is not passive, that watching what is actually there rather than the story you have decided to tell about it is the only way to build correctly. I am watching what is actually there, a temporary room in a facility I did not choose, a legal situation Harold is managing from a strong position, a house on Birchwood Lane that is waiting for Marcus and Deshawn, and the something growing that I asked him to plant in the garden. A chessboard in the common room where Raymond Cole is waiting to be beaten again. A coffee group that meets every morning and contains 7 men who built things and are still building things regardless of what the room they are sitting in says about where they have arrived. A letter that has not yet been delivered, a meeting that Sandra and Kevin do not yet know is coming, a conversation that will be the most honest one we have had in years, whether they are ready for it or not. And my children, who I love with the permanence of a father's love, which does not require reciprocation to continue being real, who I am waiting to see walk through that door, not to argue about the will, not to perform remorse, but to be my children, the way they were before the drift took them somewhere I could not follow. I do not know if they will come. I will be here. I have always been here. My father Joseph built something from nothing in a country that told him he could not. My mother Grace made breakfast after overnight shifts because she had decided her children would start every day with a hot meal, and she was not going to let circumstance change that. I am Walter James Okafor, their son. I ran a business for 30 years, and I built a house into a home, and I raised 2 children, and I loved a woman for 28 years, and I made decisions that lasted, and I am making one now from a room with 1 window that will also last. The decision is made. The house goes to Marcus. And somewhere, a 9-year-old boy named Deshawn is going to grow up knowing that men build things, that they do the work correctly, that they show up. That is what men do. That is what we have always done. My name is Walter James Okafor. I am 74 years old. And I am still entirely, completely, and legally myself. If this story reached something in you today, share it. For every father being managed instead of loved, for every man whose patience has been misunderstood for surrender, for every person doing the quiet, consistent, daily work of showing up and not being seen. Share it for them. And if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe right now. Hit that button. These are the stories that stay with you, and I tell them here, and I want you here for all of them. Leave a comment. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me about the Marcus in your life. Tell me about the thing you built and what you decided to do with it. I read every single one. Show up, do the work, keep your paperwork in order, and never let anyone take your keys off your own hook. Thank you for being here tonight.